Welcome, everybody, back to the Oklahoma Drill Podcast. I'm your host, Andrew, and of course, I got my co host, Matt, here with me. For once, we are going to take a break from speculating about quarterbacks in the offseason and trades and free agency and all that other fun stuff with the Jets that we're used to dealing with year in and year out. And instead, we're going to start our position previews off today, starting with the offensive tackle position, arguably the most important position for the Jets to figure out after quarterback. And if they don't, it's going to be really interesting to see how their offense ends up looking. Matt, let's jump right into it here. Let's start with the guys that we have on our roster as it stands right now. And there's only 3 names. Let's go ahead and break that down.
Yeah, it's kind of skim pickings out there. Well, we have Brown, who, as we all know, had his shoulder injury that he had to deal with all year. And it's not exactly clear whether he's going to retire, come back, and then he still has that shoulder injury that he needs to take care of in the offseason. So he's a huge question mark. And his contract is kind of set up in a way where we could possibly even just cut him. And save, I think, around 10 million. So that's not a horrible move to do. But at the same time, again, we only have 3 guys under contract. So cutting anybody seems a little counterproductive to what we want to do, which is rebuild the position. Then you have Max Mitchell, who's another question mark. He left at the end of the year, and it turned out he had blood clots in his leg, I believe, which he had to get taken care of. So he's a huge question mark. We don't know what caused the blood clot. We don't know if it's something that's going to affect him short term, midterm, long term. We don't know. So that's a huge question mark, and I don't know if we should really rely on him until we know a little bit more. And then you have Mount Becton, who again has missed a lot of time, much like some other prospects that we won't get into. But you got Becton, who has missed 2 seasons in a row, both knee injuries. So that's already a red flag right there. Knee injuries, they tend to breed more knee injuries the more you have. So that right there also tells you that he's probably not somebody that they can rely on. And what year is he going into? Is he going into his 5th year?
Becton is going into year 4.
This will be
but
his
they need 4th season.
Do they need to pick up that 5th year soon?
Yes. So the way that works,
that
I'll break that down for the people listening real quick. The deadline to pick up Mekhi Becton's 5th year option is May 1st of this year. So before his 4th season starts, if the Jets were to pick up that 5th year option, it will lock them into a guaranteed salary in Mekhi Becton's 5th year in 2024 of $13.5 million, which would currently be 22nd in the league for offensive tackles. So top half of the NFL in terms of payment, since every team has 2 starting tackles. So 22nd is top half in terms of payment for Becton if that were to be picked up. And considering he's played sparingly as a rookie, played, I think it was 12 or 13 games as a rookie, missed some time there, played a half of football in Charlotte in week 1 of 2021, and has not been on the field since. There's a lot of uncertainty, and I'm not sure the Jets are going to pick up that option, even if Becton were to be healthy. And I think we're all hoping that that's the case, that he can be healthy, get back to his rookie form, and go remind people why he was the 11th pick in the draft. Even if he is fully healthy, I just don't know if the Jets have seen enough reliability out of him to lock themselves into $13.5 million in 2024.
No, I don't think they could do that. That's way too risky. I wouldn't even think about even a contract extension, which I think is probably the better route to go. If anything, we can see what he can do this year if he can stay healthy. And then just give him maybe a prove-it deal at the end of it all, and go from there. To lock ourselves in for 13 mil without even knowing if he can stay healthy and make it through camp, I can't sign on to that. And well, that pretty much sums up what our tackle situation is. I would say
not great, Bob.
Abysmal. Not great, Bob. It's not good. So we really need a lot of work there. And the first stop is free agency. I think that we have spent a lot of money on this offensive line, with not a lot of gains to come from it. You have CMG, who's played okay, but really not hasn't lived up to the billing that I set for him. I had higher expectations. And then you had Lakin, who was a huge disappointment. We were expecting Pro Bowl level left guard play from him, and we were sorely lacking that.
At this point,
So
I'll take average level guard play from Laken Tomlinson.
yeah,
Like,
so we've spent a lot of money. So I don't know if we're going to spend big money on the top tackles. And right now, those top tackles are who we got. We got Orlando Brown of the Chiefs, who's only 27 years old, played 98.4% of the snaps last year, who's not a bad option, but will be expensive. He's already under contract, I think, this or last year for around 16 mil. I would probably guess that he's probably going to get a contract, probably a little bit more than that this round. And then you have Mike McGlinchey from the 49ers. He's 28, so a nice. Again, these two guys are at a really nice age to pick up really nice big contracts. And again, I don't think we're the ones that are going to be doling out those big contracts. And then you got Caleb McGarry from the Falcons, also at 28, played 100% of the snaps. These guys are going to get top dollar, and like I said, not our party. So then you go to the next tier. Who are the guys that have starting experience, maybe up there in age, maybe even have some swing tackle experience? My first guy is Calvin Beachum, the guy that we've had that we know well, who's been on the team was on the team 3 years, I believe. Back, I know he just spent
yeah,
3 years in the
he was on the
Cardinals.
Jets for a little while. Yeah,
I think it was 3 years. He's a great guy on and off the field. He's the kind of guy that teammates love, builds locker rooms, and is just a nice veteran presence, and who also has swing tackle experience. I think he's had over 1,000 snaps at both. So if we want experience that allows some flexibility and utility, I think Beacham's a great choice. Another guy I have is Cameron Fleming from the Broncos, 31. So two guys that are over 30. Also has experience with left tackle and right tackle. Both these guys, they're not going to really blow anybody away with their performance, but they're solid guys. They're guys that we can rely on if we need to in a pinch. And the last guy is Riley Reef, who also is up their age. I believe he's going to be 34, 35 once the season rolls around. But he, again, with the Bears, had a solid season. I don't believe he played as much as the other guys. I believe he only played 40 to 50% of the snaps. But when he played, he was solid. And if we're only asking for spot play, I think that's just fine. So between all the options, I think these last three guys are probably our best bet for at least giving us some solid depth. I don't want to rely on them to be our starters week one. If they are, that's already a red flag. But if, let's say, our starter goes down, I would feel comfortable with these guys stepping in and taking the reins for a little bit.
Yeah, no, I would agree. That's what you're looking for with depth. When it's very, very hard to have enough depth to have perfectly capable starting caliber players be backups. Because if they were that good to be starting caliber players, another team with a need is going to come looking for them too. So it's you can't always expect to have the most amazing talented depth for your backups, but with the offensive line position and specifically offensive tackle for the Jets, they're so desperate. They really need guys that could potentially come in and start. There's so much uncertainty around the starters where you don't really know. We don't know about Becton South. From all reports, he seems to be looking very good. He's not overweight whatsoever. Looks to be in great shape. Seems very motivated and confident that he can come back and dominate this year. And I know we all hope he does. Max Mitchell, recovery first for him. Make sure his life situation is completely and totally sorted out before we even worry about getting him back on the field. But at the same time, if we're not even going to worry about getting him back on the field, then we got to find depth to replace that spot as well. George Fant's a free agent, very likely not to be returned. Dwayne Brown, we mentioned, with his future, he could be back for another year. He is under contract. The Jets can also probably cut him and save some money, or Dwayne Brown just might retire. because he almost retired at the start of this season after that injury and played through it all year. He may just be like, okay, enough is enough. My body's telling me I can't do this anymore. And no one would blame him after the career that he's had. And I believe he'll be 39 going into this year. At 39 years old, that's, yeah, no one would blame him whatsoever if he wants to ride off into the sunset.
No, 38.
38. Either way, there is so much uncertainty right now. The guys that you're looking for to bring in free agency, if you're not going to be going after the top of the market guys, which we don't think the Jets will, we just don't think the money is there. And we've seen how going after the top market has worked for them in the past with their last two big signings. It doesn't seem likely that they're going to be swinging for the fences. You really got to be deliberate and smart in the guys you bring in. And that's why I really like the idea of Kelvin Beachum, because he's a proven veteran. He's played on both sides, like you mentioned. Locker room presence is awesome. I think he's going to be a great guy to come in and help these younger players that are still young and really continue to mold and mentor them and get the mentality in that offensive line group right. I think that's going to be huge. I want to bring up two names on the free agent market that are kind of not expected. And I'm going to be clear that I would put both of these guys after the three that you had mentioned in terms of potential depth options. But I think they could be had for cheap. And I think they're young enough that if you can turn their careers around, that maybe you can get a little bit of a steal. And the first guy I want to talk about is Andre Dillard from the Eagles. Former first round pick, didn't seem to go so well for him in Philadelphia, really struggled with his strength and ability to anchor and own up to the physicality and the strength that the NFL requires. You know, hand to God here, I'll admit it. I loved Andre Dillard as a draft prospect. I loved him. I thought he was excellent. I thought his feet and his ability to mirror and match and hands and pass pro were awesome. Was a little worried about that strength. Wasn't ever the best run blocker. Had some issues where he could, going against power rushers, could give him some issues. But I loved the feet. I loved the technique. I loved the quickness. I love the ability to be left out on an island at left tackle and match up with the speed that is so prevalent around the NFL. I think with the Eagles and the way they've been, it wasn't just quite the best fit because the Eagles want to be a physical running team first and foremost. And they want to be the biggest, nastiest, strongest offensive line. You know, they want 5 Lane Johnsons out there, and who wouldn't? And Andre Dillard just doesn't quite fit in that same landscape. But I think he could be an interesting option for the Jets. One, because Joe Douglas knows him. Joe Douglas was with the Philadelphia Eagles when they drafted Andre Dillard. So this is a guy he scouted and had a hand in bringing into the league. And I'm sure he's got some familiarity with them already. And I also think for the Jet scheme, which we all know now, Matt, with Nathaniel Hackett as offensive coordinator, is likely to be the similar West Coast wide zone offense. They're going to want guys that can get out in space and can move as well. And I think that Dillard's ability can work well with that zone run game where you're not necessarily having to toss guys out of the club and be the strongest dude on the field. Your quickness can be a little bit more to an advantage. And I also think if that, as a pass protector, I know he has great skills. And I know that the athleticism in him is so hard to teach and rare that if you can get with the right guy, which I think we have in Carter, our new offensive line coach, I think that's the guy to get the motivation behind him, get his technique ironed out even more so than I think it already is. And I think he could be a really, really interesting option, probably for very, very cheap. I don't expect Andre Dillard to be commanding nearly the amount of money that, you know, a guy like even a Kelvin Beachum would at his point in his career, or a Riley Reif, or Eric Fisher as a free agent in Miami, and definitely not the top of the line guys like Orlando Brown and Mike McGlinchey. And he's only 27. So you have a guy that's still in the prime of his career. And if you find a way for him to get in, and even if he starts out as a backup or stays as a backup, but you're confident in his ability and you like what you have, that's a guy that can stick around for a while. And I think that there could be really something there. The other guy I want to talk about is a little bit of a risk. Not a little bit, a risk. Let's call it what it is. Because the one problem the Jets have had is injuries. And it would be really kind of counterintuitive to target this guy at all. But with how desperate the Jets are, I feel like you have to keep all options open. What about Isaiah Wynn, the former Patriots tackle? Isaiah Wynn has not played in every game in a season once in his 4-year career. Hasn't happened. He played 16 games in 2021 in a 17-game season, started 15 of those games. Last year in 2022, I think it was 9 games total before he was placed on IR. I'll go confirm that right now. 9 games in 2022 before he was on IR with a foot injury. And the years before that, as a rookie, he played 8 games. And his sophomore year, he played 10. Guy has not shown that he can stay healthy in the NFL. And it would be an absolute risk to assume that this time it's going to be different and Isaiah Wynn's going to be perfect and be healthy. But if you're looking for backups and you're looking for guys that can provide solid depth, and if you're looking for the best possible talent for the price as well as age being involved as well, I think he might be one of the better options because Isaiah Wynn was a first round pick for a reason. He was a little bit undersized as a tackle, but his movement skills were great. He had more than enough strength and power to move. You're not going to play for Bill Belichick if you cannot win at the line of scrimmage in the run game and be physical. So we know he's got that aspect to him as well. And again, for the wide zone scheme, he's got more than enough agility and athleticism to be able to survive. I'm not sitting here raising my hand saying I'm signed off on it. Let's go, 100% on board Isaiah Wynn to the Jets. But it's a name that really caught me off guard when I thought about it more. And the more I thought about it, it made a little bit more sense. I think it could be a down the barrel option. And I don't want to rule anything out at this time.
Okay. Yeah, I can definitely see it. I just, with the amount of injuries and time that has been missed by our offensive line in the last 2 years, has kind of traumatized me to the point where you have a guy like Wynn. I want durability even from my backup. That's where I'm at right now.
Totally understandable.
And with this guy, with his history, just scares me. And especially with the guys that we're going to be relying on to maybe even be starters in their history. So I get it. It makes a lot of sense, but it just scares me.
Oh, it's terrifying. It's completely and totally terrifying. And that's why I started that by saying it's a risk. And it would not make logical sense, like you just said, with all the injuries they've had over the last couple of years, to bring in a guy that's shown to be nothing but injury prone himself. It is absolutely the definition of counterintuitive. But the Jets are kind of at a point where they might not have a choice.
Yeah. That's true. I mean, there's no good answer really for what we need and how to get it. So we're going to have to take some chances somewhere or skimp a little bit on talent, but maybe we get some durability. Or maybe we can get talent, but then we're missing durability. So it's really a who's who and depending on pick your poison kind of situation.
Right.
But yeah, all these guys are options. We kind of flew right by our own options, and we missed one. And that's AVT, maybe making a move outside. He was shown the ability to the move outside in college and not miss a beat, and he kind of did the same for us when we needed him to last year. And I feel like we can do that easily, and he offers us that flexibility to be able to do that, and maybe even go into the draft. Maybe not thinking, hey, we need a tackle in the first round. Maybe we can do an offensive guard like O'Shaughnessy. Maybe we can go somewhere else or a wide receiver or something and not worry about tackle, knowing that we have AVT who can fill right in at left tackle or right tackle, doesn't matter, and kind of leave our depth with a guy like Wynn maybe or Beecham or any of the guys that we've mentioned, and have Becton and maybe Max if he's healthy enough to battle it out for right tackle. That's still a little scary. I would probably still draft a tackle early, maybe not in the first round, but maybe in the second round. I think this draft class is deep. We'll get into them in a little bit, but I can see AVT being an option, especially when we are lacking options, really.
Yeah, I think he absolutely is an option. And I actually want to explore this a little bit more because you brought up a really good point in terms of flexibility, where as it stands right now, we're assuming AVT is going to play guard. McGovern is a free agent at center. Yet to be seen whether he's going to be brought back or not. I think I'm leaning towards the fact that he won't be brought back. And I think the Jets could certainly look to sign a veteran or draft somebody to learn under a veteran in that aspect and fix that center position. We know Lakin's going to be at left guard. That we know for sure. And so you have questions at both tackle spots. And theoretically, if you move AVT out to, in this case, left tackle or right tackle, even, you have a guy that you're confident in being a solid player who we've seen evidence of being able to play tackle in the NFL on a whim. Where before the Pittsburgh game, he gets kicked out to, I believe it was right tackle for that game, and played flawlessly. And was absolutely excellent. And at pretty much every week since then, he was in a new spot depending on where they needed him. We know this guy can play tackle. He was a tackle in college. He played tackle his last year at USC and was good enough to be a first round pick. The question with AVT was arm length. And so that kind of led him to being moved inside, where everyone, including us, said he's going to be an all world guard inside. He'd probably be a pretty good tackle anyway, but he's going to be really, really good at guard. We've seen that come to fruition, and we've seen him survive at tackle. The flexibility aspect, if you're looking for a guard instead of looking for two offensive tackles, you only need one and a guard. Or if you Becton can stay healthy and you're looking for more depth, you're looking for a depth tackle and a starting guard. The guard market, just looking at free agency, is significantly more lucrative than the tackle market right now.
Yeah.
There is so many more options that you could have at guard that aren't going to break the bank, but are still solid veteran players that know what they're doing. First and foremost, Roger Saffold. I would love the idea of having him at guard, having a bigger guy that can be that mover to create space off the line of scrimmage. And he's played in schemes similar to this before. He spent time in Tennessee under, oh God, who's the Falcons head coach? Arthur Smith. When Arthur Smith was the OC in Tennessee, same sort of scheme. That was under Matt LaFleur, who's again West Coast Shanahan system, all the same stuff there. After him, you can go further down the line. You have Trey Turner in Washington, who was the former Carolina guard, got signed for a year in Washington on a 1-year deal. He's going to be a free agent, still relatively young, really solid player that would help out on the inside a lot. And then a name that Jets fans are probably familiar with in Oday Abushi, who had kind of a career resurgence in LA with the Chargers, since gotten onto the Rams, played pretty solid football there. Finally, Dalton Risner in Denver, another younger player, plenty of starting experience, not going to probably cost all world amount of money to where he's going to be the highest paid guard in the league, but you might be able to get a quality starter and not have to break the bank. And if you're looking at an offensive line of AVT and Becton at tackle, Lakin, whoever at center, in this case, let's just say McGovern for the sake of ease, and then Risner or an Abushi or a Saffold, that might be a better overall unit than trying to find two new offensive tackles. And maybe you get into a situation where it's Kelvin Beachum ends up having to be your starting left tackle, and you have Beachum, Lakin, McGovern, AVT, Becton. There's a lot of different situations and combinations that you can make, and I think you give yourself more options moving AVT to left tackle or right tackle, or either any tackle spot in general, to free open a spot at guard. I think it's an easier path to get a guard than it would be to get a tackle. That said, if you're looking at the future of this team and where things can go, and rather more so than just what can we do to solve the problem in 2023, I think that's where we got to go next, Matt, because you alluded to it. This offensive tackle class in the draft is freaking awesome. It's freaking awesome. There is so many great tackles in this group. I cannot remember quite honestly, the last time I remember having this many good offensive tackles in one class was 2020 when the Jets took Becton. And you had Jedrick Wills and Andrew Thomas and Becton himself and Tristan Wirfs, and there was still some other guys behind that. There is so much talent in this offensive line group. And the Jets have, in my opinion, a prime pick at 13th overall, to where I think they're going to be plenty within range of one of these guys. And I think they're all graded similarly enough, at least for me, to where I have about 4 or 5 players that they could take at 13, and I would be perfectly happy with any of them. Wouldn't hear any complaints whatsoever, and the pick would get a grade of an A from me. You don't have to. I think if the Jets want an offensive tackle in the draft, they can get one. It's as simple as that. So let's start there. I want to hear your first guy that we're going to highlight. We're going to highlight a couple of guys here as prospects that we really like. Matt, go ahead and lead things off, because we got 2 guys that are kind of polar opposites a little bit.
Yeah, so I'm going to go with Peter Skoronski of Northwestern. Has kind of fit the mold of the Northwestern tackle with shorter arms, but very technically sound. And he's a baller. This guy has plus strength, both upper body and lower body. I think he's got a great anchor. And like I said, he's technically sound. I always see him just doing the right thing, always in the right spot, has his head on a swivel, looking for people to mess up. And I like that. I like a guy with a little bit of edge and a guy that can really just get into the face of defenders and maul them when we need to maul them. Has decent movement skills, so I think he can survive in our wide zone. Um, but again, he has those short arms, so it's going to turn a lot of teams off. Much like Slater and much like guys like Worth, where they look at these guys and they have kind of like an old school of thinking of, nope, if they're this short or have this short of arms, not tackle, move him inside. And he very well may be moved inside at the next level. But you know what? Teams are gonna first try to find out if he can play tackle, and I think he can, much in the same vein as the other two guys I just mentioned. I think he has all the ability to do it. He's not perfect by any means. I know you found some flaws to his game. I believe with his footwork or his ability to explode out of his stance.
I'll get into that in a sec.
You'll get into that, but I think for what he is and what he's able to do, I think he's got a very high floor. And his ceiling may not be as high as others that we might mention, but at the same time, I think what we need is safety. We need reliability. We went for bold when we went for Becton, and we missed out on guys like Werfs, who had maybe a lower ceiling, but at the same time, again, a really high floor. And I think that's Skoronski this year. I think we get him. We know we have a solid option, and he gives us flexibility, much like AVT. And I love guys with flexibility. We can move him inside. We can keep him outside. I would try him out outside first and see what happens. I love this guy.
Yeah, I like him a lot too. I want to be very, very clear about this because this is Skoronski is going to be one of those players. Buckle up, everybody, that Matt and I are going to be debating about for months, where you are significantly higher on him than me. And not to say that I don't like him at all. I do. I like him very much. And he's going to get a first round grade from me. It just might not be at offensive tackle. And quite honestly, I'm not as much worried about the length with Skoronski. My issue with Skoronski is his ability when transitioning from getting out in his kick slide and firing to the edge against a speed rush. When that rusher, when he matches that speed and the rusher says, okay, you've caught me, I'm not going to win the corner. Now I'm going to transition to power and I'm going to look to bull and run through you. I've seen some struggles with him and his ability to transition from firing out of his stance to then anchoring, getting his feet in the dirt, getting his feet under him, and holding his ground. I've seen a couple instances where he gets caught off balance, and I just don't know if he has the transitional footwork to be able to go from, I need to get out to the edge as fast as I can to match this speed. Oh, I matched it. Okay, now it's time to anchor down without getting walked back into the pocket. And the reason for that is his foot quickness is good, not great. He isn't the absolute fastest, quickest, most athletic guy in the world. So when he's going against rushers that have a good first step and have good speed to the corner, he has to kind of sell out to them a little bit. He has to kind of really get out in his stance and kick out and fire hard, because otherwise he's not going to match their speed and they're going to get the edge on him. That kind of leads to him overselling to the outside, and that's when he can be a little bit off balance and get walked back. Personally, outside of that, I love the guy. And for all the reasons that you mentioned, his technique is awesome. He looks for work. His attitude is great. Dude moves people wherever he wants to in the run game. In the run game, forget about it. He is an ass kicker. He will pick you up and throw you on your butt over and over and over and be right back for more the next play to do it again. And I love that attitude. I love the awareness and the smarts to always keep his head on a swivel. Has no issues passing off stunts or twists, looks for work. All of that is great. And I'm looking at this guy and I'm going, you could probably survive at offensive tackle. You'd probably be pretty good. I don't know how good you'd be. I don't know if we'd ever be sitting here going, Peter Skoronski is one of the best offensive tackles in the league. But you put him inside at guard, and I think you have baby Zach Martin. And that's very, very high praise, and I say that for a reason. Because I think this guy could be, we're talking about Peter Skoronski as one of the best guards in the league, because he has the strength. He has the ability, when he isn't firing out of his stance and off balance, to anchor and hold his ground. I think he would have no problem being on the interior with defensive tackles or interior linemen and being able to hold up against their power. It's not that he's weak, and it's not that his arms are so short that, he's never going to survive. It's just that one ability to the outside when if you don't have the great foot quickness to always stay controlled in your sets and be sitting in the chair and not have to oversell, that's when you can kind of get caught slipping. And if you don't have the ability to transition to anchor quickly, then I feel like it's a situation where if I'm a defensive end and I'm studying Skoronski's tape, I'm firing out of my stance on however many first reps as I can, and I'm going to try and get the corner. And it doesn't even matter if I get around him. I just want him to sell out to it. And the second he sells out to it, then it's 3 steps, inside arm, long arm, bull, and I'm walking this dude to the quarterback. And that's it. That scares me. It is a major concern for me. And it's why I think if I'm looking at these guys as an analyst, I always want them to be in the best position to succeed. I never want any prospect to fail. I want every prospect to be as good as they possibly can be, and I want them to go to the best position to achieve those heights. And for Skoronski in particular, I really think that's going to be at guard. That said, if the Jets take him and he ends up playing at offensive tackle, I think he's quick enough to execute the scheme. I don't think it's a problem where he's not athletic whatsoever. I think his athleticism when going forward and when getting on the move and run blocking is better than it is going backwards when he's in his pass set. And I wouldn't be too concerned about that. I think he'd be perfectly fine on play action. I think he's a guy that would be smart, pick up the scheme really well. He's going to be good in the locker room. There's been no questions whatsoever about that. A guy that followed in Rashawn Slater's footsteps at Northwestern and took over the job for him and played admirably. And his sophomore season, he looked fantastic. He looked absolutely excellent as a sophomore, and that's where to start this past season, looking ahead when the 2022 draft had just finished and people are going, well, what's going to happen in 2023? Peter Skoronski was being talked about as a top 5 pick because he was so good as a sophomore, had a little bit of a down year as a junior, and kind of came back down to earth. Where I think you have him as your offensive tackle 2 right now, Matt?
Yeah, he's 2 for me right now.
Yes. So he's your second. He's my 5th offensive tackle. And that's kind of the difference and disparity between the two of us. That said, I still have a first round grade on him. He probably would be my number 1 guard, quite honestly. If I was ranking him as a guard, I think he probably would be. He would give O'Cyrus Torrence a real run for his money. Because as much as I love Torrence, the one thing with him is he's really not that fleet of foot, and he's kind of scheme dependent. You really kind of need him to be in a man blocking scheme and a power scheme where he can down block and tight pulls to the inside and get up on the linebacker. You really kind of don't want him in space or being on the backside and having to reach block a 3-tech to the front side. That's not the game you want from Torrance. But I think Skoronski might be able to do that enough and still have the power and the strength to just throw people around on the inside. And I know for a fact that he's smart enough to handle that switch. I wouldn't have any concerns about that whatsoever. I really like this guy. And I want people to hear that. I don't want anyone to think that I'm sitting here and I'm anti-Skoronski. I'm not. This dude's a great player. And if I'm looking at things of who am I sure is going to be a really good offensive lineman in this draft class, he's probably one of the first names I'm going to pick. Where if I'm just going, who do I know is going to be a good player in the NFL? I know Skoronski is going to be solid, whether it's a tackle or whether it's at guard. At the very least, I know he is going to be solid, and he does have that high floor. But I'm a sucker for ceilings, and I'm not ashamed to admit it. I especially in the first round, I think the first round is about physical eliteness, and the first round is about finding those guys with the high ceilings. Because this is the NFL level, everybody is talented. Everybody, can hone their technique and is going to be coached, assumingly, is going to be coached by the best of the best. You're going to have guys that are only going to be so good because of their athleticism, and they've kind of maxed out everything else that they can learn. So I look for the guys that have ceilings that are limitless. I look for the guys that have ceilings that don't go, that have no end. And the guy I'm going to highlight next, I absolutely fits that bill, and that's DeJuan Jones at Ohio State. Holy crap. This dude is a freaking monster. Mountain, 6'8", 368 pounds, I believe it was, as he measured in at the Senior Bowl. And his wingspan, this is the absolute insane thing that I cannot understand. His wingspan at the Senior Bowl was measured in 89.5 inches. If he goes to the combine and measures in with that exact same wingspan, which I'd be surprised if his arms randomly get bigger or shorter, and it would be the longest wingspan in combine history. Period. For any player at any position. The longest wingspan in combine history at 89.5 inches. The size and the length with DeJuan Jones is something you can't teach. And it allows him to have a very, very unique play style where for a lot of other guys that big, and the Jets have seen this with Mekhi Becton as well in the same sort of vein, for guys that big, you're naturally not expecting them to have the quickest feet. And I was just talking about having to sell out to the corner. And if you don't have that quick feet, needing to fire out, and that's when you can overset and guys can kind of get in your chest if you're off balance. The thing with DeJuan Jones is he's so dang big and he's so dang long, it doesn't matter how quick his feet are. It really doesn't, because they're quick enough to where he's not caught out of position and he can get to the outside, and he can just keep guys at bay with his length so easily that they have to take a 14-yard arc just to get around him. By the time guys are even close to getting by him, the quarterback's already thrown the ball for 2.5 seconds. And that is a rare skill. And that is something, like I said, again, you can't teach. On top of that, just watching the tape, in terms of pass protection, this dude is so much more refined than he gets credit for. His technique is great. His hand placement is awesome. His snatch and trap technique, for people that don't know what a snatch and trap technique is, if you're ever watching an offensive tackle, it's usually a technique against power rushes. When defenders, when they're rushing, specifically bull rushing, and they're trying to get all their momentum into a push and get all their hands forward and run a guy over, they're going to be leaning out over their toes. And they're waiting to make contact so they can have a force to lean on and then drive off to create pressure and bench press the offensive tackle off of them and get to the quarterback. A snatch trap technique for an offensive lineman is as soon as you see that defender going out to rush you, you snatch their hands in midair and throw them to the ground. And you trapped them into going for that power move and literally just knock them off balance and throw them flat on their face. DeJuan Jones does it just about as good as anybody in this draft. Period. So power moves are already a problem for him, because I don't know how you're supposed to move him or run through him at 6'8" and 370 pounds. He's got the length to get into your chest before you can even get close to him. And then you try that power and he's just going to grab onto your hands and throw you face first into the dirt like it's nothing. There is the independent hand use is there. The ability to reset and counter back to the inside is there. And again, he's so big and so long and so wide, the angles to get around him, whether it's on an inside counter or just to the outside, are so much wider than it would be for other players. It gives him like an unfair advantage. It really does. You go to the run game, he can get a little lungy. That's kind of my negative with him, is that he gets a little bit too far out over his toes because he knows he's so big and strong. He's always just trying to move guys out of the way and throw them into the dirt as hard as he can. And it can lead to him getting a bit off balance and a bit over his toes. But when he does it right, it looks like Mekhi Becton at Louisville, where he's driving people out of the screen. When he does it right and he's taking on a blitzing linebacker and he's trying to, fold to the outside and get up on the blitzing linebacker and he meets him head on, it's like the linebacker ran into a cinder block wall. They don't go anywhere anymore. Their momentum is immediately stopped, and DeJuan Jones doesn't even flinch. This dude is a rare